Hey everyone, welcome back to the Good Doctor's continuing coverage of Netflix's show The Crown. Today we are talking about episode 2 of season 3, which is called Margaretology. I'm Kristen, this is Erin.
Hi.
And if you're just joining us, then we're just going to do a quick reminder again that we don't do bullet point by bullet point recaps of events. There's lots of other lovely resources out there that can help you. We're going to largely talk about the overall themes and also, spoiler alert for this entire season, complain about how the show chose to not address a massive ethno-sectarian conflict that was happening across the Irish Sea within its own legal borders. So if you are not interested in learning about Northern Ireland, no judgment.
This is probably not the video recaps for you.
This is where you probably should leave us.
Yeah, so we're going to start each episode based on the year that is taking place in this episode to tell you what was happening in Northern Ireland. So this episode takes place in 1965 and deals with primarily the visit of Princess Margaret and Lord Snowdon to the United States and their subsequent dinner with President Lyndon Baines Johnson. So in 1965...
Pulling out the middle name.
Well, I just did a bunch of research before we came online to find out what was true and what was not in this.
Spoiler alert, almost nothing was true in this episode.
We just watched the episodes. I'm sure you guys do this too and go, did that happen? Was that really how it happened?
I didn't learn that.
Really? Did LBJ hate Kennedy? We're going to ask Google. So in 1965 in Northern Ireland, nothing too terrible is happening yet. We have a relatively liberal-ish prime minister, but there is a lot of sectarian tension, between largely Protestant and Catholic groups. That's a huge generalization, but we're shorthanding it. And nationalist groups in Northern Ireland. So things are starting to bubble. Things are starting to boil. Harold Wilson certainly would have known.
Yeah, for sure.
That things were happening. Nothing that we think significant enough that would have probably warranted mentioning in this episode. I should say that.
Yeah,
there will be further episodes this season where we will be real salty.
Yeah.
That Northern Ireland does not get a nod, especially since we looked at this season last night and Wales gets 2 episodes, which I'm not saying it shouldn't.
We love Wales.
And the Aberfan tragedy, I think, I know nothing about it, but from what I have heard, totally deserves its own episode.
But so does 1968 in Northern Ireland. So
you are correct.
Anyway, so in this episode, a couple things happen that. Okay, let me pause.
Pause and course correct.
We have no idea what story Peter Morgan is trying to tell about Elizabeth through this episode. So if we were just going to take this episode at its kind of face value and not as part of the larger narrative of the show, I would say that what Peter wanted us to get is that Margaret is somewhat capable of some things within the, I don't know, administration,
like
as it
duties,
were.
royal duties.
Yeah. And but that Elizabeth is also right to be cautious because she's a bit of a wild card.
Right.
But that the relationships between the sisters is fraught because Margaret believes that she would be the perfect face of the British people. And Elizabeth is internally shaming herself for being the boring one.
Yeah.
Cool. We know that story.
We knew that story already.
And the events that he chose to use to tell that story, like none of them happened the way that he said they did.
Yeah.
So I don't know why. Like, if we want to talk about Margaret's visit, cool. Let's talk about how she pissed off like every Hollywood celebrity and no one wanted to be your friend anymore.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about how she saved a bailout that isn't even historically
accurate. Yeah. So I think we were talking about it this morning before filming, and just decided. So what was interesting, the crux of this, the arc, if you will, of this episode was this tension between Elizabeth and Margaret and who is fit to be, what it looks like to be the monarch and the appearance of it and the charm that, Elizabeth has always felt lacking in herself, especially compared to Margaret. But y'all, we spent 2 seasons on that. And we also did a whole episode on how Margaret isn't really good at it when she went on that state visit to Kenya. And and made a bollocks of it, to use British parlance. So we've seen this story already. I didn't feel like, and like Philip was one of the better parts of this episode, which was surprising to both of us.
But cool. Like we liked their relationship.
And I liked the conversation that he had when after Margaret comes back and she asks for more duties again. And Elizabeth is like, oh, I feel bad for her. She's had a really hard time of it. I'm like, has she had a really hard time of it, though?
They started having these conversations when the girls were like 12. So
you have known since you were 12 that this was your life. And I'm sorry that you feel hard done by it. But you are now 36 years of age.
And like world's tiniest violin.
Get over it is my general sentiment to Margaret. I don't want to diminish that her life has been difficult and challenging, and I have no idea what it's like to be a royal person. But also, we're 20 years into this thing. Like, just suck it up. I don't have time for your, it should have been me. It's not you, and it's not going to be you. So,
yeah.
Get over it. So that's, pretty much what we thought about it. We looked up some of the historical things.
So real quick, that dinner pretty much didn't happen that way. And if it had, a couple things, just real quick, for anyone who is unfamiliar with the political persona of Theodore Kennedy, who was in the room.
Yeah.
If Margaret had told a bawdy joke like that.
The deceased President Kennedy's brother, if anybody doesn't know.
Yeah, sorry. So Ted Kennedy also, from what we understand, loved a bawdy joke.
Yeah.
Trust me, we would all know those limericks.
Yeah.
If she kissed Lyndon Johnson, we would know.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot we would know.
If LBJ openly and at a state dinner told inappropriate jokes about the dead president,
we would know.
Like, it was just, and for us as Americans, like, we understand caricatures are a way of telling stories.
Yeah, and it was just a lot of shorthand that LBJ was crass, which he was certainly blunt.
He was blunt. He wasn't afraid to swear. He was from Texas, but it felt like a caricature of, like, Peter Morgan doesn't know anybody from Texas.
And so this is the cowboy movies that he watched growing up.
So yeah, he based the caricature of a United States president off of the movies he's seen about Americans, which is really irresponsible. And like, in a show that makes such a point to nuance and humanize people that we only know as caricatures, the royal family, because none of us know them. So like, the whole point of this is to show the human complexities of this. And then LBJ is pissing in a...
Yeah, that was my thing. Like,
in a bathroom for 3 minutes. I was like, what?
Like, we do shorthand in storytelling, especially in television. You do visual shorthand because you're not inside someone's head. Like, it's one of the downsides of a visual medium. So we use shorthand. And so a shorthand for a character being crass and a bit of an idiot and someone that shouldn't be taken seriously is that we have to watch them piss.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we meet Jimmy Dugan in League of Their Own. And at that point, we're supposed to think he's a mess because he is a mess at that point in the story.
He is a mess, yeah. He's an alcoholic. He's a quote-unquote loser because he can't keep a job.
He's a sexist, you know?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of shorthand throughout visual storytelling that when you have a character, when you as an audience are part of a character's urination practices, you are to believe that character is a bit of an idiot. And so, like, it was all this kind of stuff, like, did we need this? What story are you trying to tell? And, like, if you hate America, like, God bless, that's fine. Like, I'm not a huge fan of it all the time either. But, like, LBJ was not our most ineffectual president that he's going to have to address as a president. I mean, this one didn't get impeached. And LBJ, like, the Johnson Library also tweeted and has been sharing information since, I guess,
last July
randomly,
probably when they knew this episode was happening.
And said that, like, all the events leading up to that dinner, like Elizabeth inviting him and him ignoring it.
Nope, didn't happen.
He never extended an invitation for her to come.
Nope.
Like, so
and
again, why did we manufacture this?
Tension.
Also, the bailout wasn't handled that way.
Oh, yeah. Can we have a hot minute for the fact that we were supposed to believe in this episode, or they were supposed to show us that Princess Margaret was going to be solely responsible for saving
the value of the pound?
$100 billion bailout?
Like, just in case anyone has not been, I don't know, if you've never watched another political show or you don't know anyone in diplomacy, there is no one human being responsible for something that big. Like, even if the president is the last word or the queen is the last word, there are State Department officials, Ministry of Interior officials in the UK whose entire job is to negotiate those kind of things. Your national security advisor over here in the United States will be part of this. Like, your Secretary of State.
Yeah, and so, like,
your Secretary of the Treasury.
The fact that it was a conversation between ambassadors and the chief of staff, I guess that guy was Johnson's chief of staff.
I don't believe that at all.
The British ambassador, no. And the president's chief of staff.
No. Yes.
Yes, but not only.
Yeah.
For a bailout of that magnitude.
Absolutely not. Which did not happen in the year that we're talking about.
It did, but it happened later.
Later. Okay,
it happened,
I'm sorry.
It happened months later in September. Unrelated, completely unrelated.
Yeah, this dinner was already set up for the Johnsons' 31st wedding anniversary.
To Margaret's visit. So, like, and I totally accept that drama shows aren't historical recreations. Like, I don't expect them to get everything right, and I expect them to take some liberties, but these liberties seemed really weird. Margaret's trip wasn't as much of a success as they made it out to be. So is he, like, trying to make us more sympathetic to Elizabeth? Yeah, I don't
it's hard also to have some of these conversations because of the actresses he cast as these people.
Let us segue into that.
So when they first announced Olivia Colman as the queen, I assumed we were jumping directly into the 70s.
Yeah.
So Olivia Colman as a human being right now is 45.
45.
So in the show, Elizabeth is in her 30s.
Like late 30s.
So like, it's fine.
It's not horrible, but Claire Foy is a young-looking woman in her 30s.
Yeah.
And Olivia Colman is an older-looking woman in her mid-40s. Like, they look like there's a bigger age difference between them than there are.
And sure, we had that moment in the first episode about, like, the queen aging and the stamp and everything else. But I was even looking at a screenshot of that. Yeah. And, like, Claire in the postage looks in her 20s.
Well, I think because that picture was
in her 20s. Exactly.
It's a coronation.
So Elizabeth is already kind of, and there's 4 years between the Profumo scandal and this episode.
3 years, yeah. So that's what we want to make really, really clear. The end of season 2, the date, the year of our Lord in the end of season 2 was 1961. The season 3 opens in 1964. So they have only aged 3 years.
No.
But just look at all of them. Like, Philip, no. Margaret is in her mid-30s, and her husband, Anthony Armstrong-Jones, is 35 at that state visit. I'm sorry, does Ben Daniels look 35? No, because Ben Daniels is 55 or thereabouts. Ben Daniels and Helena Bonham Carter are both in their 50s. So
in terms of visual storytelling, we are being signaled that these people are in their middle age and not in their into middle age. Like, that's different.
And it's just, I never really thought about it until we found out just last week what years this season was covering. And then I was like, wait a second, but Kennedy's visit was just in the last season. And so all of this aging and maturing that is supposed to have happened,
that has been visually cued to us as happening, is not an actual, like, thing.
You can change a lot in 3 years. You can build a more stable marriage in 3 years.
You certainly can.
But it just strikes me as really, really odd.
And unnecessary.
If he wanted it to be more believable in terms of age difference, he could have skipped the 60s or like, and I know he really wants to do like 2 chunk seasons with the actors, and you're going to be hard pressed to find somebody better for this role than Olivia Colman. Even when I was really frustrated with the episode last night.
I mean, she's just the best. And Helena Bonham Carter the same way.
Yeah.
Like, they are both playing this. Hand them their Emmys immediately right now. Thank you so much. And Tobias Menzies is making a real good pitch for me to care about Philip. And, like, guys, I love Matt Smith. But, like, I did not want him to get an Emmy for that role.
Because we did not like Philip.
I did not like Philip. But no, this, like, it's... So once again, we need to ask critical questions about art. Who is creating it? Why are they creating it? What story are they trying to tell us? And what message are they trying to sell? And to me, this episode felt like a sermon that, like, Peter Morgan had things to say, capital S, about America,
Mm-hmm.
and this is how we're going to hear it. And I will be completely frank in that I think he has things to say about the current America more than the 1960s America, and made that happen in that way.
And because we're all interpreting art through the current lens with which we're viewing it, right? So we are watching this in 2019.
And he has things to say about 2019, which fine, we all do. Then don't tell me a story about 1964. Sorry, that's really salty, but
as you can tell, we've had some salt over this. It just makes it more complicated, particularly when you're telling a very specific historical period drama.
Yeah.
I think you want to lean, as much as we want them to lean into the authenticity of the visual representation of it,
which remains beautiful.
Think of, if one of the cars showed up in a scene in this episode that was made in 1975, like that would be really incongruous, right? That would be historically inauthentic. So why is it really important to get the dress and the cars and all of that right, and not really important to get
foreign policy
right? And I understand moving things around for tension purposes, and like I give shows some grace for that.
This one was like a pendulum.
If we wanted to tell that story about Margaret, as we discussed, we already told it with her disastrous outing in Kenya. And B, we could have still done it without this weird bailout pressure. Like, anyway.
So next,
it might sound nitpicky, but
spoiler: this entire season is going to be nitpicky.
So if you love The Crown unreservedly, I would tell you
we're probably not your people.
Probably not to come back for episode 3, and we understand that. A lot of people don't want to be critical of television, particularly in 2019.
Mazel, God bless. We will maybe see you for another show. But this is not, like, this is just, it's hitting a lot of our professional buttons too, we'll admit. Like, This is the era of kind of British and Irish and European policy that we've spent a lot of time thinking about, and a lot of time thinking about the relationship between America and the conflict in Northern Ireland, which will absolutely not get talked about in this show, which is fine because it's not a show about America. But we've just found, so we're going to be a little bit something about this. But next episode, we'll probably also be crying because
it
is about a part of British history we don't know a lot about. So we'll be doing some research as well. But we're going to spend some time. We're going to spend some time with a terrible tragedy that involved children losing their lives. And that is, and I am glad for the families of those children that this story is getting told.
And for Wales.
And for the Wales and for the Welsh people. Welsh Twitter is very excited that their history is getting, or at least the Welsh Twitter we've seen, is excited that their story is getting told, and we want to respect and honor that.
So I think that's really, really important. And as much as I would critique what some of the other episodes look like, as terms of like the synopsis that I've seen, I'm really, really happy that they dedicated an episode to Aberfan, and I hope they do it justice. Stay tuned.
We'll see. See you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.